grateful for her and for her leadership. Those two long-distance runners are joined by some of your own Illinois long-distance runners. We have with us Rory Hoskins, who's the mayor of Forest Park, which is here in the Chicago area, I believe. And we also have Sister Representative Carol Evans. She represents District Champaign 130, Champaign-Urbana. And she has also brought reparations legislation and proposals both here in the state and nationally. This is indeed an international justice movement, and before I say more, you know me, I will say much, but I'm not going to do that right now. What I'm going to do is ask each to take about 3 minutes to say a bit about where they are with this issue and the work that they've done. And I'm going to start with Candy Cause. Yesterday, Ken gave a very powerful presentation. Now, you ain't going to have as much time as you had yesterday, but I would like you to introduce yourself and to give us a high voice about what you said was so foundational about reparations and Juneteenth.
Thank you, Dr. Malone. I want to thank the Reverend Jackson and Rainbow Push Coalition for this panel. Yesterday we were at Shiloh Baptist Church, the Global Circle of Reparations and Healing, which is a group of Black organizations, not only here in America, but also on the continent and elsewhere, convening under the title Building a Culture of Repair. And basically, my comments were that this culture of repair that we need to build has to be based on the 3 fundamental components of culture, which are collective consciousness, a shared ethos or personality, a spiritual component, as well as the language. We have to get our language in. So what we're seeing now in the reparations movement is a lot of energy, and this energy has to be directed in the way that we're all saying the same thing. Because we're at a point where we haven't been in this space in this country in the modern era. We haven't been in this space since Reconstruction, where you've had 2 pieces of legislation in both houses of Congress being debated around this repair. We haven't had the amount of scholarship that's being directed. We haven't had the amount of allies that we have at this time. Corporations and institutions all are joining this effort right now to talk about this issue of redress. And in order for us to win at this particular moment, we have to do so simultaneously. So I was the National Mayor Co-Chair of the National Coalition of Black Reparations in America for 5+ years. With that organization about 16 years, and I'm now the Director of Reparations United. And we look at how we can unify locations around the country on specific issues of redress, make sure that while we're waiting on the federal legislation, while we're working on the federal legislation, we're able to get some things done on a local level.
That was very good, man. Get a couple more than 3 because you are our fearless leader. We also want folks to have a sense of what NARC is, the National African American Reparations Commission.
Well, thank you, Dr. Malvo. I would say within my 3 minutes, but it's ironic that you have the mic. Whatever we're talking, we have to restrain we're talking, so attention, please. Anyway, quickly, I want to say that first and foremost, thank my fearless leader, the Reverend Jesse Rose Jackson. People may not recall that we founded the National African American Reparations Commission in 2015 at an historic conference in New York. I was then a distinguished lecturer at York College, City University of New York, and we held rallies in different places and so forth. Reverend Jesse Jackson was there and made a powerful presentation on behalf of reparations at the founding of the National African American Reparations Commission. So I just want to say that because people may not be aware of how strong we've been on this issue. Let me just quickly say that the National African American Reparations Commission, which as we call NARC, has 3 fundamental missions. One is to put together a 10-point program. You can find that 10-point program at IDW21.org. It talks
talks about both direct benefits and community benefits. But it primarily tilts towards looking at the big picture kind of community benefits that can help repair our communities in general. Not opposed to specific benefits, but large benefits like community economic development. Many people are working on that issue. Health infrastructure, communication infrastructure, and so forth. The second thing we work on is HR 40, and we have been working on HR 40 very hard. And I must say that the COBRA Legislative Commission has been among the organizations that have led the charge. Under Congressman John Connors, we never really had over 50 co-sponsors for HR 40 to study the bill, and I use that word deliberately because we have a different bill now. That bill was rewritten with the co-support, Movement for Black Lives and other organizations from a study bill to a bill to be a study, but also develop reparations proposals for African Americans. That's a different proposition. Previous bill had, we were organizing. This bill now, as we stand today, has 196 co-sponsors and 20 people are prepared to go to board if it would come to the floor. We're Congressman Chief Jackson, that's 217. We're one vote shy of what's needed to pass it in the House of Representatives. However, to pass it in the House of Representatives, given the configuration of the Senate, where there is a moral, we don't want a moral, we want a real. So therefore, we are pushing President Biden constructively and positively because it's a win-win. Congressman Sheila Jackson has said that of all the policy issues that are out there, it is really reparations that strikes at the heart of structural institutionalism. So we're pushing for that.
I'm going to ask for respect from the audience. Can somebody please get security for me? Somebody please get security for me. Sir, I'm going to ask you to be quiet respectfully. Brother Gary, I'm beginning to feel we are in the middle of a panel. Wait, sir.
What do you mean? Why don't we need a permission to study? A permission to give a bunch of you all $20,000 a year. $200,000 a year going to you all? We're not going to stand back and watch that go on.
Well, let me just say this.
We don't want a permission. We don't want a permission. And nationally, we're going to rise against it.
Well, that's good. And we're ready for it. We're ready for it.
1989, y'all make no noise about it.
You are entitled to
Compromise. You're a compromise city.
You are entitled to your
You're not an elder.
and you can bring whatever you want to bring.
You're not an elder.
We have 260 co-sponsors. Did y'all
We
hear
don't want
that?
it.
260.
We don't want it.
You don't want it.
We don't want it.
Do y'all want it in the audience?
We don't want it.
Do you want it? You want HR 40? Most people want HR 40 now. And we are going to pass HR 40 because that's what reparations is all about. The fact that you're not aware of it speaks out of your knowledge. The fact that you're relatively new and young and enthusiastic, we appreciate that, but it needs to be channeled in a much more constructive way. As I was saying, HR 40 is on the brink of being passed by executive order and we're pushing hard to get it done. The three primary issues, HR 40, voting rights, criminal justice reform, are issues that we really want to push to get over the top. The final thing that's happening all across the country is municipal reparations. And in Evanston, Illinois, right, this area, of course, Robert Simmons was successful in getting $10 million, over $10 million proposal to get reparations done. Now, some people will say it's not reparations because it's too small, it's too little, and all those kind of things. It is reparations by definition. So those are all the things that we're going to do with the National African American Reparations Commission. We have been working with the HR 40 strategy group. This week will be 94 consecutive weeks. We have been working, not talking, not yielding revenue. We have been working for 94 weeks. Congresswoman Sheila Jackson inherited the torch from Congressman John Connors and working across the finish line. We're almost there, and we're going to get it across
so self-contained, face or whatever. I was about to go to Harriet Tubman. Harriet Tubman said, somebody, y'all want to be free? I'm going to make you free. Or figure out what for you to be free. That's not exactly what you said. I'll make friends up here. He can help you be free. So I just want to apologize to the audience, as you know that. But it is a function of where we are. That we're doing something positive, moving forward, and when we're moving forward and people are standing still, they're going to be a challenge. We're going to move on with this panel, and we're going to move on with this panel. That's what we're going to do. And I want Representative Carol Evans to talk a little bit about what she's done, especially at the international level.
Can you all hear me? Yes. First of all, thank you so much for being here this afternoon. To Dr. Daniels, thank you. And brother, we've been working on this for a long time. Certainly, you all have been working on this a long time. I want to speak to a couple of things. I'm Carol Evans. I represent Champaign-Urbana and Illinois General Assembly. I do want to give voice to the frustration of my brother. I want to give voice to it because I'm a member of the Illinois legislature. And I'm also a member of the Illinois Legislative Black Caucus. And we have been fighting for a very long time to right some very, very wrong issues in government that has taken millions of our children and locked them up and put them in prison. So we have to give voice to the frustration of young people. We also need to remember that enslavement, racial terror, political disenfranchisement, housing segregation, lack of jobs and economic security, separate and unequal education. I'm at the University of Illinois. We have less Black students today than we did in 19 with Project 500. There is a huge problem here. The destruction of Black families. An 18-year-old boy was shot in the face last night in Champaign-Urbana and killed, with a lot of young Black folks outside during that time. The disenfranchisement of education in our minds has caused us to self-destruct. So we have a real crisis on our hands, unequal justice in the court. Reparations is not due to everybody. Reparations is a repair for the treatment and the enslavement of hundreds and hundreds of years in this country. And it is specific. It is not general. It's specific to the descendants of the enslaved. And what we have done is morph the definition to include everybody that's been mistreated. And I don't buy that. We also know that California just released their task force. Illinois passed in 20, the African Descendant Citizens Reparations Commission. And today, on my way here, I called my staffer in Springfield, and I said, how many people have been appointed to the commission? One. This is Illinois. So when we talk about quite serious in reality, if we don't have significant outrage at the condition of the Black community surrounding this center in the city of Chicago, the murder that's taking place in our community, that is all the result. That is all the result of the enslavement and the disconnection of African people. And so we perpetuated serious crimes against Black folks in this country. And so myself, Dr. Sundiata Shajua at the University of Illinois, Dr. Lou Turner at the university submitted and passed UN resolution, Recharge Genocide in the state of Illinois. And within that resolution, yes, we did. It was a hard thing to do. Some of us too. In that resolution, we called on the United Nations to intervene and hold the United States accountable for its atrocities against African Americans, enslavement and post-slavery, and the economic disenfranchisement of our communities. You cannot tell me that you have locked someone out for 160 years since emancipation, and those communities are supposed to fare well. They will not. So Black folks, this is my advice, is we should not pass legislation around reparations that is myopic. Because what I have seen is myopic, this new term they call for Black, Indigenous, people of color. We should not use that language. We need to be very careful how we use language on reparations. Because what I have seen is that every package we file that is to benefit communities of color go to all communities except Black people. And that is problematic in legislation. And then we need to also not just hold elected officials accountable. We need to tell folks not to vote for them. I'm just being real. I have been in the General Assembly 8 years. And I tell my community, do not vote for people who will not act upon your issues prior to them running for that office. And we continue to send people to Congress who do not believe in reparations. And we continue to let them stay in Congress after they get there when they don't vote for reparations.
That might have been your mic, Johnson.
So I tell you what, I'm gonna drop it there and we'll leave it to any questions.
You know what I'm going to do is we'll move a little bit, I won't say out of order, but basically to have extra chat. But I'm going to get to it in a minute. Kim Howard gave part of the presentation yesterday. I think there's a point of difference, and I just wanted to explore it respectfully and thoroughly. And when we talk about who is against reparations, I want Kim to deal with the response and perhaps some of the texture that you shared with us yesterday about the harm is done. The harm has been done. Sister, my research deals with economic inequity. And economic inequity is really about why some people who are melanin deficient, and I said those who are melanized, have eaten. And what we know is that I want to share my own background. My parents are both African Americans, descendants of the slave people. My maternal grandfather was Haitian. Should I get reported reparation because one of my maternal grandparents speaking out of Africa? Those of you who know I have that flaw or strength, either one. But no one pulled anyone aside after the legal was an example used yesterday saying, are you a descendant of slaves before we shoot you? Show me your papers so I know if I'm going to shoot you or not. So I'm taking a little bit of thunder out of Cam's argument. I like Cam's conversation with the justice. So Cam?
So yeah, the debate that Dr. Howard was talking about is the debate around linkage. Who should get reparations? In HR 40, the commission was supposed to determine that. The commission was look at all of the theories and issues around that issue, and then they will make their determination. But it's front and center now because the California bill, which was a mirror bill of HR 40, also had to make that determination. And they did so in a very close vote that lineage was determined who should be repaired. We take a different position. Our position is that succinctly all Black people armed in America, by America, should be repaired in America, by America. The lineage issue says unless you can prove that you had an ancestor here during the enslavement, you can't be repaired. Well, those are the only people who should be repaired, should receive redress. We understand that there were 3 periods of crimes. My sister talked about crimes against humanity. There were 3 periods of crimes against African people in this country. There was a crime during the period of enslavement, 246 years. There's a crime for another 86 years, you can say 186, from either 1865 or in the Reconstruction 1877 up until 1965 with the Voting Rights Bill, Civil Rights Bill, the Housing Act, in theory, ended Jim Crow segregation. And then you had the post-Jim Crow, or the post-apartheid, and that was apartheid. You had the post-apartheid period, which is a period from 1965 to today. We know that police terror is a crime against humanity, torture is a crime against humanity, the predatory lending crimes against humanity perpetrated against our community, and the ongoing apartheid disparities that continue to exist in our community is a continuation of the crimes against humanity. And so we say that Black people, some immigrants came into this country after enslavement from the Caribbean, and who are our family. Our family was split up at the boat, at the docks of Africa, and some were split up in Cuba where they first came. And so some went into Central America, the Caribbean, and South America, some came up north. So we have actually blood lineage in this entire hemisphere. But some came after enslavement ended in this country, and they were subjected to the crimes of apartheid. And these are international crimes against humanity. They were subjected to torture, and terror, and discrimination, racial discrimination, anti-Blackness, anti-Africans. And they were injured, and their children today receive that injury and have inherited that injury. And then you have some people who came during this last period of criminality against our people post-1965, like my brother who was just executed, summary execution, who came from the Congo, ran from the police out of terror, out of sheer terror, because he knew what would happen to him, and he just ran, freaked out, ran, and what happened? Executed. And so we see these three periods of crimes committed against Black people because they're just Black, because they have African descent. And therefore, we say that the National African Reparations Commission, Reparation United, and a host of other national organizations say all who were injured by this country, in this country, should be repaired by this country, in this country.
I want to, we're going to continue this system. I know that you probably have something else to say, as do I, as Dr. Davis, but we have not brought the mayor of Forest Park into the conversation at all. Roy Haskins, so I want to bring you in now. I'm not sure, I want to talk to you a bit about your work on reparations. You said that you were part of the legislation that was introduced, so please tell us a little bit more about that.
Thank you, Dr. Donald. So I serve as the mayor of the village of Forest Park, which is a west suburb about 10 miles outside of Chicago. I was the first African-American elected in the history of the town. It's a town that's over 130 years old. So what we have done is use our levers of power to make life more livable for Black people in the west suburbs. Examples are working with the schools to make the children of the town feel like they're part of the town, renaming streets when we have the opportunity to rename streets, hiring Black businesses when we have the opportunities to create new contracting opportunities. And then Dr. Malvo mentioned the Juneteenth work. 15 years ago, we started a community event. We just simply called it the Juneteenth Family Group. Forest Park has lots of haves and have-nots. The have-nots tend to be Black. But we have great physical facilities, great partners. So we simply leveraged our political capital to get control of the Park District for one night to have a Juneteenth event. But we did it over and over and over. And we raised a generation that are now millennials that understood the Juneteenth tradition, where they used to not practice Juneteenth at all. And so what that is it spread to the other suburbs. And so now we have very affluent white communities who are passing resolutions to honor Juneteenth. We had the Juneteenth flag raising last Monday in the village of River Forest. If anyone's familiar with River Forest, you know it's a very affluent community in the west suburbs. $1 million homes, $2 million homes. We had Juneteenth flag raisings in the village of Oak Park. But also, my state representative happens to be the Speaker of the House, State Rep. Emmanuel Chris Welch. He's the state's first Black House Speaker. So we have a group of 4 Black mayors, myself, the mayor of Broadview, Katrina Thompson, the mayor of Bellwood, Andre Harvey, and the mayor of Maywood, Daniel Booker. So we're leveraging our resources, our political capital, working with Black firms and demanding contracting opportunities. We're moving into the space to address environmental racism. when we look at all this infrastructure money that's about to start pouring into the states for things like installing EV charging stations, electric vehicles, solar panels, we're working with foundations to address workforce deficiencies so that Black folks have the opportunity to participate in this new economy. So that's some of the work that we're doing in the West Suburbs.
Thank you, and especially thank you for spreading that message to the suburbs. I think one of the things that's so important about the passage of the holiday is that no matter how they feel about it, slavery is going to be on somebody's mind on Juneteenth. In other words, newspapers will write about why we have Juneteenth. Those like Mitch McConnell say he doesn't want to think about reparations, and he doesn't have to think about it. It'll be in his newspaper, it'll be in the Kentucky newspaper. The more we talk about the past, the more we're able to claim it. I'm going to take just a minute to talk for a second about economic envy and economic lynching, because this is part of the reason why we deserve, want, insist on reparations. Who knows what economic envy is? I kind of raised it a little bit earlier. When some people cannot stand Black folks having anything, that they will destroy you, kill you, burn your place down because you have more than they do. We all know about Tulsa, Oklahoma, 1921, thanks to the ignorance of the orange orangutan who tried to have a meeting in Oklahoma, Tulsa, the day before the anniversary of that horrible massacre. So the newspapers got it caught. But it has to stay in our mind. Here's what happened. You had Black Wall Street was so rich. Black people had everything. The only thing we didn't have was a bank. But we had everything. We had the church. Black doctors got together and built a hospital. They could come out of their own money. We had the first person to own an automobile in Tulsa was a Black man. And that brother was so brilliant, he took his automobile apart together, took it apart, put it back together so many times that he started the first automobile stop. And when White people started getting cars, they had defense. We had a 750-person theater. You could go down the list and call the roll of what we had. We had sisters who were doctors' wives who didn't work, who went to New York to get stuff from Tiffany's. That's what those sisters did. And economic envy was such that when those crazy people broke into those people, the first thing they did is whip those sisters' stuff. I have the privilege, they thought of a woman named Dr. Lydia Hooker. She was one of the survivors. She died about 4 years ago. And Dr. Hooker actually talked about how police came in and broke her mama's Caruso records. She was 6 years old at the time. And took her dolls, took the clothing off her dolls. But in any case, why did Tulsa happen? Now, some would say that Dick Rowland, the white boy who was Black boy who was a shoe shine boy, that he raped Sarah Page. She was an elevator operator. All he did was kind of bump into her. Because your elevators back in the day, they weren't like our elevators. You could easily bump into somebody. She was startled and she screamed, or some say she didn't scream, she just said, and a white man saw it and said, went to the newspaper, Dick Rowland raped Sarah Page. Notably, Sarah Page never pressed charges, never said she was raped, in fact, disappeared from history. But the governor of Oklahoma started a commission, only white people on it, and the commission was supposed to find out why Tulsa happened. Here was their answer. Too many N-words have too much money. And the N-word was not Negroes. This was an official document. Tulsa may be one of the worst cases, but it's not good. We can't rank it with them. Elaine, Arkansas might be one of the worst cases where 200 brothers were lynched because they dared attempt to organize, taking control of their own labor. Wilmington, North Carolina might be one case where Black and white men worked in the shipyards together. Same salary. White folks couldn't stand a house. N-words make the same money we do. And so a plot was forward, and the next thing that you know, they said the river ran red. They never figured out how many people died. They know how much Black property was lost. They know that the 60 most prominent Black men were rounded up and sent out of town, having to yield their property. There are so many other cases like this, and there are micro cases as well. But they're all about economic envy. Why do we need reparations? Because basically, we were never allowed to accumulate. That's what we deserve. And so we're making up, Sister gave a list. Dr. Daniels gives a list of all the ways that federal public policy has prevented Black people from accumulating, from the Federal Housing Act that redlined Americans, to the GI Bill that did not affect us, did not allow us to, what do we call it? Negro removal, the urban removal that raised our neighborhoods. Buffalo was a great example. They put a highway in the middle of the Black community in Buffalo. So we can go down with this. So there are many reasons. Enslavement was a horrible wrong, but enslavement was the tip of the iceberg. After enslavement, this continued to happen and happen and happen again. Economic envy. Remember that term, use it when people tell you, well, I didn't have any enslaved people, I didn't have enslaved economy. You just participated in the structure, made it possible for you to benefit from enslavement and its aftermath. That is the source. I just needed to share that. I don't know if I'm supposed to be a panelist in this house, a moderator, so I guess I'm a panelist moderator. I can give you the hats. But anyway, I'm not going to take all the air away from my panelists, but I wanted to share that because I didn't think they were necessarily going to raise it. And it is my area of academic expertise. Sister Representative.
Thank you, Don. You know what, the economic envy, and I'll take your phrase, because I think that's exactly what we are dealing with. If we think about all the iterations of housing, the land grab, the gold rush, let me just throw the legalization of cannabis on top of that. And if you go from state to state to state, I have not ever had a difficulty whether I served in the city council, county board, or the state rep, to determine who was Black. I had no problem with that. Nor does the system have a problem with determining who's Black, because disenfranchisement tends to happen there. And when we set the law here in Illinois for the legalization of cannabis, that law passed, of which I objected to and did not vote for. That law codified the disenfranchisement, exclusion, and discrimination against Black people, Black business, and Black vendors. And it still stands to this day because it has not been corrected officially, although many bills have been passed. But when the industry started as a medical industry, this is where the real Achilles heel is. When they passed medical and allowed it to take place, all of the vendors in the state of Illinois, certainly, were white vendors in the medical space. And then the brilliance of someone decided that if you had a medical license, when we recreationalize it, you will get your license first. And then you'll be able to pay a little bit of a fee here and there to the state. You'll be able to open up and start your accepting recreational sales at the same time. Now, Illinois has raked in billions of dollars in legal cannabis sales and taxing. And to date, we have issued licenses to alleged Black people, but ain't nobody making no money in the Black space. So now this is the key that I think Dr. Malone, I will get you a book on economic envy, because that's a very powerful tool for policymakers. If you really want to redress the issues in the Black community, you have to do it economically. You have to do it economically. I can't afford to send my children to school so they don't go to school. I can't afford to send them to tap dance lessons because I ain't got no extra money. So if you don't deal with the economics of this, you will not recover the Black community. And when the bill passed and recreation took hold, there was no lawsuits against there being an all-white industry in Illinois. The lawsuits came when there was an attempt to get social equity implemented. And that's where we sit in Illinois. So we keep falling for the new iteration of badges and incidents of slavery. We keep falling for that. And we allow our elected officials to tell us anything, instead of us looking at the record and seeing what did it actually say? And what did you actually vote on? And why did you let that pass? That's the question I would ask. I'm an activist. And so I'm like a brother. I'm going to ask the hard question. Why would you vote for something that you call reparations when you pass it? In Illinois, that was a celebration all about it. And to this day, we are still trying to fight into a space that's brand new. We can't go back and get the Black Hills back from the Native American brothers, right? So they didn't give the Black Hills back. They said, we'll just give you a few dollars for that, and we'll keep the Black Hills. If Black folks keep falling for this, we are going to be a permanent underclass in the next 20 to 40 years. Yes, some of us will do well and look good, but the majority of our community, the masses, will suffer greatly if we do not take this moment as seriously as the moment is. The Proud Boys took their moment seriously and ran up to the Capitol. How serious will we be when we lock up the next generation of Black folks, or they end up in the mortician's ward, because we've economically disenfranchised our community?
Thank you, sister. I appreciate that. That was rousing and it gives us a perspective on Illinois. Dr. Rondell, I want you to go into detail, you and Cameron, you especially, about the NARC 10-point program. Because one of the biggest questions that is coming up, what will reparations look like? Will it be a check? Will it be something else? And it has to be both and, not either or. 10-point program, please.
Let me also say that we also have to be, there's a lot of very good energy out there now. And quite frankly, when the brother came, I commended him for his energy. It's good energy. And it's positive. A lot of good stuff is happening out there. And a lot of it is based on the frustration that we feel in our community. But some very, very positive things now. Equity policies out there now. A lot of people talking about equity. That's been driven by a movement, not just sort of fall out of the sky, because there was a movement, particularly Mount Coleman, disparity, race trafficking. But equity is not reparations, because equity deals with that which will happen from this point forward, putting a lens of equity on policy moving forward. The other thing is ordinary public policy. So when we start talking about reparations, I mean, there's stuff that needs to be happening right now that needs to be taken care of by government. But not all that ordinary public policy, that which you should be doing anyway because we're taxpayers now, is not reparations. So we need to be clear about the definition of what is reparations. And reparations is for, yes, enslavement, but all of the legacies of enslavement. I would call upon Ta-Nehisi Coates, who was not a believer in reparations. He did not begin with enslavement. He began by examining the whole issue of the Negro Removal Program and disinvestment in Chicago, and he said, what? All of these years that Black people have been deliberately and intentionally targeted by policies that are derivative of enslavement are more prepared. And so that definition becomes incredibly important. So what we do in the 10-point program, what we do it deliberately, is to show the different forms. And a part of it is based on the whole notion. First of all, there's a process. That process, which Cam and Cobra really worked hard on in terms of the 5 steps and so forth. But succinctly, it's number one, you have to acknowledge the crime. You have to apologize for the crime. But it can't stop there. There must be redress, there must be compensation, restitution, all of those things apply in terms of repair. Because at the end of the day, it's about repair. How do we make the people whole again? In that regard, we say never ever can those who perpetrate the crime define the nature of the remedy. It can only be defined by those who have suffered the harm. Because you'll find some people, oh yeah, we harmed you, and here we want to give you some scholarships. We want to give you this. That cannot be. We have to be, it has to be self-determination in that regard. But we also say, I'm going to just tell something as an example. It is tragic that after all these years, there are maybe 3 survivors, I suppose, and they're all over 100 years old. They're all new benefits, direct benefits of some kind or another. Now, I'm glad some corporations come forward, but that does not exonerate the state for the role that it played in fact, sanctioning the terroristic destruction of Black Wall Street. But where the benefits come in is, even if we were able to pay all of the descendants, and they should, what about community? how do you rebuild Greenwood? How do you rebuild the community? And that's why you need collective benefits that will rebuild communities, that will build hospitals and healthcare systems and educational systems and land. And one of the examples I use is Native people. And by the way, you know, Black people have always stood for and have supported other folk. I mean, that's part of who we are as a people. But on the other hand, you're right. That does not mean that reparations has to be bifurcated. Everybody can go give it's like rural people go down a million. And everybody get a little piece of it. We're not going to go down that road. But Native Americans, at least after the Trail of Tears, and by the way, there are Black folk up in there too, by the way. There are Black Indians, there are African Indians up in that process. That's a whole other conversation. But at least they got sovereignty over land. So some choose to do casinos or whatever, but they have the right to choose to do various things. We could choose to do a Wakanda village, for example. We did. So there are millions of land, there's millions of acres of public land. And one of the 10-point programs talks about that. We want land. Malcolm X talks about that. Land is the basis of independence. We want land, because with that land, we can build independent institutions over which we have quasi-sovereignty, in that Native Americans don't have complete sovereignty, but they have a right to choose in various ways. So the 10-point program, which you can find at IBW21.org or Reparations.com, the students, well, you can look at it, look at the 10-point program. Now, one of the other things I want to quickly say is, we also talk about having a reparations finance authority, an independent reparations finance authority. In Evanston, Illinois, they have taken a step in that direction because we say when you put together your local plans, there should be an independent basis where Black people can control the resources. Because sometimes it comes down to, okay, but we will still control it. We want, and there's some legal issues, and you well know about that. But we want to be in a position where Black folks can actually control the allocation of the resources, both public resources, but also private resources, because these private institutions owe us as well. Corporations, colleges, universities. We want an independent fund, and we can therefore use that to dispense with our people's input and their discussion of various programs and projects, both in terms of direct benefits, but also community benefits.
And we want to add to the 10-point program. One of the things, Dr. D, that you didn't mention was the sacred sites, the commemoration of sacred sites, which I think is as important as anything else. There are places where people were lynched, 5,000 people who were lynched. We want markers where they were lynched for people, so the issue of lynching and other sacred sites, the Elaine Arkansas. We're going to look at Valdosta, Georgia, where Mary Turner was lynched, a Black woman. There were very few women who were lynched, but she was one of them. And lynched in the most horrible ways, even though she was hanging on trees next to her, because she was lynched because they said she was mounted and arrogant. Oh well, give me my tree. But in any case, there are lots of places where we want to have those sacred sites. So that's some of the other thing. And I'm glad you mentioned reparations, finance authority. Once we had 123 Black Gold banks, now we have 23. There's so much more we can. But there are things that Dr. D and I have not mentioned that stand out for you folks, things that I'll let you know about. And again, we commend you. I see some of y'all right here. IBW21.org. Lays the whole thing out. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a couple of one of the deals around the issue of health. We need a different new healthcare system in this country. One of the things we just recently did, COVID did, is we came out with a report called The Harvest to Our Genes. And what we were able to do was look at, I would share some research, maybe about 2 years ago, my brother was doing some research around overcoming the legal argument that we didn't have standing to sue for reparations. And so he had looked at this field called transgenerational epigenetic inheritance. And basically what that means is transgenerational, something that's passed down multiple generations, more than 3 or 4 generations. Epigenetics is this new science around how the environment affects the genes. And then inheritance means that you inherited this effect on your gene based on historical trauma. And so when we look at what happened with COVID and how that, and the entire health profile of Black people in this country is, there's a disparity in illness that's race-based. We can see it when we look at the data. And so we have to have a healthcare system that takes into effect the historical trauma that we've experienced that is affecting us both mentally as well as physically. Because through the science of transgeneration epigenetics, they look at this on how third generation grandchildren of Jewish Holocaust survivors had higher rates of illnesses than their peers whose grandparents had not experienced the Holocaust. And so we've experienced 400 years of historical trauma and terror. And so we know that our health profile is a direct result of enslavement, apartheid, Jim Crow, and police terror today. All of them affects our health profile. So we have to have a reparative system around health. We have to have a reparative system. One of the 10-point programs is around education. We know that in this city, Chicago, only 13% of Black children who graduate from high school read and write at the 12th grade level. They have an 87% failure rate to graduate our children ethnically. And so when they go to college, that's why our dropout rate is so high across the country. Black children go to college and they drop out because they're not prepared. The systems of oppression, of anti-Blackness do not prepare them to move into these spaces where then they can build careers and be part of a growing economy. So we need an education system to address those issues and those harms as well. And go to the IBM.org, and there's some other
I'm going to mention two real quickly because and one has to do with the fundamental right, also repatriation. In other words, there are people who say, and I've always supported the right to self-determination. We do not believe in the American state. We don't care. It can't be reformed, even if we reform the body. And they would like to return. And we say yes to that proposition, but we say yes with reparations in hand. In other words, not going, and there are nations on the African continent that are addressing the right to return and also dealing with the complicity and some of the painful issues of people being involved in one level or another. We're not the perpetrators, but nonetheless. And so that is happening. So we say the right to return with reparations. The other piece that somebody mentioned this the other day is the criminal punishments, criminal injustices. That is the 13th Amendment. Abolishing, rewriting, or whatever, that clause that in fact sanction imprisonment, sanction the criminal punishment system also needs to be abolished. So that is part of our 10-point program as well.
I want to get our brother from Forest Park in this. You're hearing about the 10-point program. Some of it segue to some of the work you've done. What's your reaction when you hear about what we're saying?
So in the town like Forest Park, the dialogue is really hasn't touched on reparations. But in terms of my reaction, my neighboring community, Oak Park, is a much more progressive town. And so we are working closely with them to collaborate and create programs. So Dr. Emmons was talking about the cannabis piece. We are working very hard right now to recruit a cannabis company that is Black owned. I've met with the owners. We found a space for them. I've followed the whole cannabis space. And it's been very frustrating because the social component never did take hold. But in terms of the little piece of municipality in Cook County that I represent, we are trying very hard to get the Black-owned cannabis company to participate in that art space. Economics has always been important. We are working with but Black-owned companies to go after very serious construction contracts in anticipation of the Eisenhower reconstruction. Can't share all the details, but we're meeting with elected officials. Companies are partnering and forming joint ventures. And so, Dr. Navo, the whole economic entity piece, I get that. We're trying to use our influence to create very meaningful opportunities for Black businesses that will in turn hire Black people. Because one thing I'll say about Forest Park, it's 20 minutes from O'Hare Airport, and it's 20 minutes from Midway Airport, and 2 train lines run there. So it's very valuable real estate in terms of the whole Cook County perspective. And so when we create an environment where Black people can live and own homes and participate in the government very comfortably, and we do work towards that, we work towards the future, and we're very mindful of the past in Forest Park. So that's some of the work we're doing, but I'm not really familiar with the whole 10-point plan. I haven't studied that, to be honest with you.
Dr. Davis, I'm going to, as you know, I have a hot date with Roland Martin.
And I want to comment on this part.
I'm gonna let you be in charge, bro.
Okay, okay, I can do that, but I just quickly, as you depart the stage or whatever. But on the drug policy thing, because in my role as the IBW student, Black World 24/7, we work on drug policy. And what you laid out is an example of structural institutional racism. Sometimes people don't understand what that is all about. It's one thing to say, for example, that if you're a formerly incarcerated person, you are eligible to. But if you don't have the resources, it doesn't really matter. You see what I'm saying? It's because people. So in California, they addressed that to some degree. So I'm just saying, for people doing this work, look to California, and they really stepped it up even more in New York, where they built in provisions for people to be enabled in the way to participate that were in places like Colorado, possibly other places did not do that. And I think also New Jersey has done likewise, but still to me that's not enough. Because it should be the same thing as a bail bond. There should be a system where there are resources in a fund that our folks can tap into to make sure they have sufficient resources. Because you're competing with multi-millionaires and billionaires now. And the final thing is we can take that industry on anyway. They're not getting away with that. We need to take that industry on. They should not make billions of dollars off the backs of the war on drugs that was a war on us.
Thank you, Dr. D. I want to, as I depart the stage, I want to acknowledge our fearless leader, Reverend Jesse Lewis Jackson, who has come in. Folks, just give him a hand, please. Thank you, Reverend. Dr. Davis is going to take over as moderator. I'm going to try to help presentable to show up on Roland's air. Y'all watch Roland Martin episodes and do Mondays is Monday. Thank you, Dr. D.
All right. Is it still okay? So I think really it's a matter of whether there are comments or questions or any additional comments from the panel. If there are questions, we can take it because I think we've largely exhausted what we came to talk about. Again, I do want to, in Reverend Jackson's presence, however, again, acknowledge his role in the founding of the National African American Reparations Commission because he was in New York in 2015 at the AME Zion Church in Harlem, and you spoke. And we have recorded it, and it's been replayed. We just wanted to point out you have been a long-time supporter of reparations, including the founding of the Reparations National Anthem. Let's give it another round of applause. Go right ahead.
Dr. Davis, as you acknowledge our leader here, look, this is an important point. And also in the work of Reverend Dr. We also learned about the Operation Breadbasket, that he came to Chicago to open the economic opportunities in the Black community, not just for jobs, but for vendors to be able to sell their things in the stores which are located in the Black community. And Operation Breadbasket is just simply an example, an economic example, of how you can open up industries and force. Unfortunately, we're at this point where all of our gains are going to have to be, again, by way of struggle and fight. Because we have all of the people in place, yet the outcomes don't match. We have a lot of Black electeds, but the outcomes don't match. See, the policies are not matching the conversation. And I'm challenging, and I get in lots of trouble, Dr. James, because of this. But I am challenging all of the Black electors to not worry about the next election. If you turn Carol Evans out because I'm fighting for the disenfranchised who happen to look like me, or I'm fighting for my Latino brother or sister who is going through immigration hoops and loops that are unjust and unfair, then so be it. But while I'm here, I'm going to introduce the legislation that we actually should be talking about, and that we should give economic opportunity in communities that are suffering and are honestly causing some of the harm against themselves and others. This is a real issue. And so we can take from breadbasket and we can duplicate that model in the modern time and say, I will not shop. What it said, I will not shop where I cannot enter the front door. I'm not going to shop in a place that disrespects me. I'm not going to shop in a place that sells us old food and garbage. We have to change how we live and how we approach these things. And we cannot be, the first panel was on voting. And I respect every panelist that was on the panel. Because the key is, yes, you have to vote, but you also have to know what your interests are that you're voting for. Not just vote, but what are you voting for is the question. And what do you expect as a result of the vote? And so that's part and parcel to the work that I think we need to do. And we need to push back on people who are suggesting that voting, okay, just vote, that's enough. That's not enough. And we've seen that that's not enough.
Well, certainly everybody who's on this stage, I can attest to that you up here would not say that, certainly, because all of those are freedom fighters who are talking specifically about agendas and who are conversant and who are educated, particularly Latasha Brown and others who are clear about what's at stake in terms of the various issues. But yes, voting in and of itself by itself is not a solution. Movement is important. Protest is important. It takes all of those things in order to move our agenda forward. What do you from? Yes.
You said earlier that not everybody deserves reparation. Can you elaborate?
You said just.
You said earlier not everyone should have reparations. What did you mean by that?
Oh, I meant specifically as was defined as what reparations means. All people in the United States have suffered oppression. There's no question about that. Different forms, different iterations. And many people have received reparations and still are. In the case of, we sent billions of dollars to Israel for Jewish Holocaust. But what is questionable is when it comes to Black reparations, as Dr. Melville said, now we get economic impact. Everyone was not lynched in the United States. Every woman, Black woman in this room knows the hurdles that Black women have to go through in this country. But just imagine what our sisters went through in enslavement, post-slavery, Jim Crow. So we know who's Black when it comes to disenfranchisement, but when it comes to economic repair, we can't identify Black people. I'm suggesting, and I'm very clear on this, that the descendants of the enslaved, and we have all this genealogy that we got to pay for, which I don't believe we should. I don't believe Black people should have to pay to search their genealogy or their genealogical group back to Africa. But that's what has emerged as an economic response. We need to make sure that descendants of the slave, whether you came through directly to New York City, or whether you came through the Panama Canal, doesn't matter to me. Black people have been defined as Black, you know exactly who's Black, and their descendants are very clear that they are entitled to reparations.
And by the way, the genealogy is, that's everybody. That's what we're saying. Who would not be eligible who's Black? I mean, that's the point. I mean, we're not going to Harry Belafonte, Shirley Chisholm. I mean, we're all Black people. It's a Pan-Africanist proposition. All Black people who are in this country have suffered in one way or another, in one form or another of enslavement or the legacies of slavery, up until this very moment that it's happening. So there might be some who might be one, but rather than even debate about that, we don't need to leave no reparations on the table. Let's get it all. They owe us, let's get it all.
Hello, my name is Tim Shore. I'm from Wisconsin. one thing that we're seeing, a concern of ours, and this I think is nationwide, is when ARPA funding is supposed to go to state and really go into these communities, the black and brown communities, they're not going to communities. Nobody's being held accountable to provide those funds to communities to help them with services and power and help give their voices back and control their communities back. So that's one thing we're seeing in Wisconsin, that the politicians have decided, instead of using it for what it's supposed to be used for, they're using it for their own little pet projects, which is taking away from the communities.
I think one of my city's mayors proposed to use ARPA funding to build a new fire station. This is supposed to be COVID relief and recovery of disenfranchised communities, right? That's how they wrote it. But yet, at the same time, the federal government did not put strong parameters around all of these other ancillary things that you can use ARPA funding for. My county wants to use ARPA funding to expand the county jail, of which I'm opposed to as well.
Any other burning questions? Any others? Yes.
Hello, good afternoon. Every time I hear reparations, it kind of perplexes me about who are we asking reparations from exactly? That's my first question. And then when I think about the authority that God gave us in the earth, He said, whatever you do in the earth, I will do in heaven. So He told Caleb and Joshua, the 2 out of the 12, went into the land to take the land, possess the land, not ask for it. So I'm trying to figure out who are we asking reparations from and why don't we just do the command of God in the manner in which He gave us the previous command, the previous even the 10.
Well, I'll just say that I'm not a preacher, so I won't answer the second one. I'm an elected official. Yes, and so the idea of reparations, of course, is from the actual government who sanctioned the enslavement, the Jim Crow period, the fear that we experience as Africans in America. So the government itself has built its entire system on the backs of enslaved and disenfranchised Black people, and now other indigenous people as well have become victims to the same kind of oppressive ideology, as well as the capitalist economy that benefits itself from the cotton that was grown in Mississippi in the South and transported to the North North. All of the economic might of the United States is based on it. And so when we say you owe for the 400 years plus of free labor. You owe for the disenfranchisement right here in the city of Chicago, of redlining, when our people came up from the South, from running from terror during the Great Migration, and landed in Chicago, Baltimore, Oakland, California, and all the other cities that are suffering today from economic disenfranchisement. The states owe reparations to the people of Illinois for the salt mines in the southern part of the Shawnee Forest. So we're asking the right people to pay. We're asking the state of Illinois, as well as we are asking the United States of America. And we have not, Dr. Daniels, if you would, talk about the international responsibility of enslavement in England and all of its allies as well.
Well, in that last point, Billy asked too, because the CARICOM Reparations Commission has, in fact, the inspiration for the National African American Reparations Commission came from CARICOM. All 15 nations of the Caribbean have demanded, even though they're in a neo-colonial state, even though they're still dependent on these countries, they have demanded reparations for native genocide, which is a principal point. They didn't go past the fact that millions of indigenous people were wiped out by the Holocaust, the intrusion of Europeans into this hemisphere. So they said native genocide and then African enslavement. So they are making the demand. And so the demand is everywhere. It is governments, but also you may have University of Chicago is big ass. Why? Because many of them benefited from this. Harvard University, because of the movement, they didn't volunteer by the way. There's a movement, there is people out there that is pushing this. Harvard University, whether it's or not, I don't know, but they should step forward and say that they're putting $100 million on the table to deal with the fact that they have a legacy of involvement in slavery. Georgetown University, the Jesuits have come forward to confess, yes, we profited from, and they're coming forward. So there are corporations, there are governments, there are institutions, all of them we're making a claim on all of them. Do you have a follow-up question?
Yeah, I just want to add that these are the same systems that made the differences, and we're expecting them to release them and make it. I heard someone say that the same chariots that are pharaohs are not going to lead the way to freedom.
Well, but here's the other thing I have to say about that is we have to also recognize when we're winning. One of the things that I have to quote Reverend Jesse Jackson on this, he doesn't hear me, but he has a phrase, keep hope alive. People hear him say, keep hope alive, and I say, keep hope alive. A hopeless people will never be a victorious people. So when he says keep hope alive, he understands that if you have hope, you can win. But you also have to understand when you're winning. When Harvard University steps forward and says, we're putting $100 million on the table, it may not be enough because it will never be enough for all the atrocities committed against us. They can never pay us enough. But our movement is compelling them to put $100 million on the table. When Californians commissioned because we organized. In Evanston, Illinois, we are winning. Now, do we need to do more? Yes. We claim the victory and then keep marching to achieve more victories. But do not, and I think I heard you say something a little bit about that internal notion of internal doubt and whatever. We have to overcome that because we are winning. Now, by the way, a part of what our reparations is due us is also because they have also, it is in some ways, it has harmed our ability to hope and to dream. We have to dream. We have to believe. We have to keep hope alive.
I say pay me and then we'll discuss it. So she asked, some people say, and I've heard this over and over again, some people say that if you give reparations, meaning monetary reparations to African Americans, they'll just split it with white people. I say pay me and let me determine that.
We can work that out. We'll work that out.
Also, there was a recent article, a recent study that just came out, I think by the Economic Council, National Economic Council, that argues for compensation as reparations and what it can do to alleviate the racial wealth gap. But they also put some caveats in there. There's a few things that has to actually take place along with that compensation, or you'll find that the racial wealth gap is even wider 5 years, 10 years down the road. And so one of those things is there has to be investment along with giving everyone a check. There has to be specific directions on how to turn that, invest that check into capital gains, investment down the line, so that the wealth will continue down the line. There also has to be increases in income, and there was another thing that they stated in that report. But the thing is, we know that a direct check will bridge the racial wealth gap, and we just have to be smart enough to take advantage of those caveats and those other things that are necessary to make sure we keep it and not give it all away. So just keep in mind, I'll show you what I'm doing.
Yes, I'd like to know how is it that we're, because I hear a lot about, some about religion, and I'm not advocating any certain religion, I'm just saying spirituality. that means anybody who is on the right side or wrong side of the issue. It's either dark or either light. And while we're here right now, because it's been dark for us so long, we're trying to get some balance in this equality. But while we speaking addressing what more about what spirituality is, and we can also, there are also things we can do to bring about balance in our communities. Some of that education we're talking about can be given to those, even to those who are incarcerated. They have not much more to do other than think and read and write. That is great. Those are great tools to learn about. But why don't we as a community enforce or create more educational benefits for those who are incarcerated? Because they have families too. Sometimes they get out, sometimes they don't. But while they're in there, they can devote their time to educating those who will get out.
I thank you, Elder, for your statement. I, first and foremost, have worked, and I'm currently on the commission. I passed the bill, HJR 27, which would reinstitute higher education back in all Illinois prisons. Because we already know that we remove recidivism almost completely when you educate a person. As you said, we have their full attention, right? But we have to educate them. So we've been moving and working. We have a commission right now that is looking at putting all education back to Illinois prisons so that they can be educated while they're there. Most of them, 85% of them, will be returned home. And when they return home, our other problem is that we have too many barriers up in front of them when they return home. Barriers to education, housing, opportunity, they can't get in certain industries. All of these things, we have to work to remove these hurdles, because if we don't do that, then survival kicks in, and that's where recidivism comes in, right? So we can save their lives, but we have to make it palatable for them to function as a free human being when they return home. And that is part and parcel to the government problem. And then lastly, I'll say the question of spirituality. I've been coming to Rainbow Porch for almost 25 years. And Rainbow Porch is known to have classes on Saturday. Reverend Jackson is here every week, put the radio program on. Our community has enough access to information, but we have to encourage them to come and get the information. We have something to do as individuals as well.
Okay, we now want to hear from Reverend Jackson.
Like segregation. We've all been, we learn to live behind our wall, couple up behind the wall, PG behind the wall, drink segregation forever. Segregation will be punishing more. Where's the other side of this question? Seems to be number one. You live strong reparation to each other. On the south side, we had 2 blacks in one office, in rows. Every black, every truck driver. It was like apartheid, that's all around the world. We were strong, black every day there. Apartheid right in the middle of Midway, it's right down the street. That is about it. Secondly, I think about the 6 weeks on the Ukraine for democracy. Now, it seems to be we demand the South, that versus Southern blacks to vote. Well, that's another issue in the South because for the spaceship's landing, we should have the most power and worship system. Which the forces were blocked by their power. There's 6%, 30%. And so we are now, those, let me say this on the black part. Black is the base in all. Everybody in life and other the most agree. True money killed slave labor. Strip your break and nothing to do with apartheid. I race with the most agree. Among the law, they suffer more. None of them are saved by law. We got that territory now. So we're going to figure out how to become the figure we fight for. By the way, getting blacks elected is a good thing. But if black people are elected, they minister white people's money into their bonds. Some of the rules that they pursue is joy and the victory. There's no doubt about it. I mean, not what happened in Buffalo and what happened in Texas. How Biden going to Buffalo, I don't know what's going on in Buffalo. Y'all don't know what's going on. I was going to Buffalo 7. Same weekend, found 6 blacks have been killed in Starbucks. So if you run Buffalo, it's going to tell a lot of whatever. And it's running in Texas. 60 billion. 66 I'm going to be on the Starbucks. And drug information. Saying that's my insurance. Right. So I'm concerned that we elected blacks will save that, will save that nation. We can't teach care. Well, before you can see. But that was wrong. That was wrong. Key. Rex was wrong. You got to raise the right question. I'm trying to bomb around. We're silent for a long time. I keep thinking about how we fight with the box in Ukraine. $60 billion. So our share, your dog and all that, it was committed. Last thing, it is really stressing that much. I read another record in UCLA last week. And the Papa African American African said this. And then said black and said black progressives. They're undistinguished, Christian speaking and all that. And they teach them Rapper Jane Brown, G up, did a little walk, Jane Brown singing some song, being relevant. Philosophy, two-back philosophy, they just rock and roll. I'm embarrassed. Next thing they had, not just that, they had all the pockets, bad. Some of them not really in the whole East Village School. And they were the same way, we were on the same ground. After this, they probably said, well, I probably need reparation. Actually, in that setup, we was like in the whole school. Trying to think about how to get on around this. Because another thing, we struggle with apartheid, a lot of African Americans said about it. Usually has one, trying to undistinguished out of him. And I kid you, not London, really didn't have to allow me to think of these old, what to say. No, having record. When we grew up, French society. But that's a graduation. That was a small black college. It's true. It's true. Undivided. These little ones themselves. They're here now on the football team. They were the brother rules. what is going to go on. Then for the public goals for professional transparent, and they can't have enforce them very well. We will lose our rules of fairness. We random wrestling. And that was a figure. It was something like that. The Ukrainian defense mechanism is not a bad thing. On the hand, while we're on that, people that no one got damage done. The price of the day. So price. Reparations and the citizen of the business. Relative. One parallel with the right side of the stroke. Was in the citizens like the condition of the boss. So it's going to be that black person there, until over the period, six comes off, like us. What we really come to the back. The last back over. First time I had it. Now, that's my grandma. I reckon she's not going to me. She doesn't, I know she doesn't. 75 years old, had the signature in the room. That was within the life. And she, that's how you eat in the house, sit on the table. You go right, she came on the server. Music on her, and she did it. What happened to her? She, mom and I took her downtown, bought it, go over and she was up to that, and my wife asked her much about the citizenship. Come off the egg, come off the island. And we got some people who never had the right to vote, who couldn't escape this house, who like the government, who did today. But my brother was about 6 years old, and that was Arab, they are running, but Arab, we are. I don't know what I'm saying, but I got to go down the mountain. Really want to run. But they got refugees out the door. Refugees out the table. Our facilities. He did this and it worked. We're 40,000, big city residents, not 8 city residents. We got 6,000, government residents, and entertainment. It's not deep enough. Everybody died, people lived there, they had 9 whites. I'm trying to say that we're really reference saying, I appreciate you so much. I think we got to grab Montgomery, you do public everywhere, you grab it somewhere. Let's take a fee and you bring it up. Maybe $20 that much, $23. Who year is that? That's different than taking on to office. You make sure that you're black first time. You ought to be on the number. As a moving person, there is something practical. Do we learn to think what you're right here?
So one of the points on the he sets the case for a value proposition for ongoing expense until an objective is achieved. The issue with Ukraine is not a fixed number. It's an ongoing number based on conditions on the ground. And so you will hear time and again a designation of public dollars to support an objective until the objective has been addressed. What we have to be clear on is what is the objective that we're trying to address, and demand that the funds be committed with an initial investment, but every level of government, local, state, and federal, has a policy requirement that they pass a moral document that we call a budget to address objectives, recognizing that there's never going to be enough money to address all of the objective needs. So how do we make sure, as Reverend has always demanded in public and private sectors, that our demand should not come at the tail end of the agenda, only to look up and say there's no more money to take care of our needs and concerns. And so, Reverend, I think what you are setting up for us is the recognition that Ukraine, as a current example, they find the money when they have an objective that requires the money. We have to make sure our objective continues to meet that standard and not back down until the objectives have been satisfied. That's a condition. That's not a amount. Thank you, President.
Check the budget, $3 last year. A budget to deal with illustration. In the South, Georgia area, and then we take Mississippi today. We believe a lot of people down there can't be right. When they just keep it strong. They have in the arts out there. $5 back on this and that's more than $5 mess. So I want to try. I want that $5 mess through church meetings. And that church before like an election come back in the night service at night. You got to tell the Roman segregation master versus slave master. Slave master, they felt we were kind of long down. Yeah, they just keep us alive and work. Slave master, segregation master was slumless. So I think some of these mentions that we wrestle with, these scholars and philosophy, I'm just going to bring it down on the house and so trying to get around.
Can we appreciate the country, please, Reverend Mr. Jackson, of Campus and Corpus Reparations, especially. Thank you, Dr. Ron Campbell. Representative Caroline, we need to talk. Mayor, my brother, thank you very much. This evening is the reception for the Ahmaud Arbery family, for those who have been victimized by the criminal injustice system. And tomorrow we will be back here again at 9 o'clock with a full day agenda. Have a good evening. We look forward